In Cataclysm, Warlock has 3 powerful PvE DPS specializations, with Demonology being the frontrunner in terms of both single target and AoE. Today we're going to be talking about Destruction Warlock. Destruction's strength is low target cleave. It is also decently competitive in terms of single target and AoE, although it is weaker than Demonology. You will not be embarrassed to take one to a raid or a 5-man. As in Cataclysm, the balance is relatively close, and unless you're really pushing super top level like speedrunning or Realm First, player skill is going to matter a lot more than spec. Let's start with just a quick overview of how the talents work and new abilities. So for Destruction, when you spec Destruction, you're going to get Conflagrate baseline at level 10. You're going to get 25% spell damage, and your mastery is just percentage fire damage. Interesting enough, Destruction is probably the best 1 to 60 or 1 to 80 leveling spec for Warlock, just because Conflagrate is really nice, and your single target burst is really nice, and your self-healing is also relatively strong. For the spec, we are going to get 3 to 3 Bane. This is just cast time on our filler. We're going to get Shadow and Flame. This is filler damage and also our 5% crit debuff. We're going to get Imp Immolate, which is just 20% Immolate damage. We're going to get Incinerate cast time from Emberstorm. We're going to get Backdraft, which is whenever you cast Conflagrate, you get that 30% haste. We're going to Imp Soulfire. This is like one of the biggest additions to the Destruction playstyle, which is relatively similar to Wrath. You're going to get an 8% damage buff for 20 seconds after you Soulfire. So we're going to talk about this a little later. We are going to grab Shadowburn. We're going to get Soul Leech. This is our self-healing. Causes our Soulfire and Chaos Bolt to restore 4% of our health and mana, and they also grant replen. We're going to get Burning Embers. So this has an interaction with our Soulfire maintenance buff. Your Imp's Firebolt causes a Burning Ember damage over time effect on the target equal to 50% of the damage done. So this is just a little bit of a buff on your Imp's Firebolt. Once this allows us to unlock Empowered Imp, which is our Imp Firebolt has a 2% chance to cause your next Soulfire spell to be instant. So this gives us like another proc to cast a Soulfire, and ideally you'd have this up enough to keep uptime on your 8% buff. Nether Ward, this is just a short CD, transforms your Shadow Ward into like able to be absorb any kind of spell damage. We're gonna get Fire and Brimstone. This is just damage, percent damage on our spells, and crit on Conflagrate. We're going to grab Shadow Fury just as like a utility point here. Bane of Havoc. This is like a really, really powerful ability. Basically what this does is it causes 50% of all the damage you do to other targets other than the Bane target to be dealt to the Bane target. So like if you have 2 targets, you're going to dot both, put Bane on one, and it's just going to basically increase your damage by 15%, which is really nice. On big AoE pulls, like as you're running into the pull, as your tank is gathering things up, you can put Bane on the highest HP target, and it's just going to increase your damage by a lot. Then again, we're going to get Empowered Imp. Here, you have a couple of flex points. I would just grab Nether Protection, which is going to reduce your damage taken by whatever spell school is absorbed through your ward by 30%. This is like on prog fights, going to be a nice personal. We're going to get Chaos Bolt. This is the same as it is in Wrath. Then here, we're going to grab Dark Arch. This is going to make our Firebolt on our Imp cast faster, which again is going to interact with our proc to give us more Soulfires. We're going to get Fell Synergy. You could go 1 Fell Synergy and 1 into Stamina. Doesn't really matter. If your pet's dying, you can get 2 of these. Otherwise, just get some Stam. And then we're going to get Mana Feed. This makes our mana from our life tap give our Imp mana. And then we're going to grab Corruption for 12% corruption damage. This is like the basic cookie cutter spec for Destruction. There's not too much variability here. For Glyphs, for Prime Glyphs, these are our main like throughput Glyphs. We're going to grab Imp, Conflagrate, and Immolate. Although with the Sims, Imp might be Incinerate might be better than Imp. You just have to sim this. I'm assuming this is going to be the BIS. This is like common wisdom for what's BIS. For Major, you're going to grab Soul Link. Everyone gets Soul Link now. It's not just for Demonology, and this is just 5% flat DR, which is nice. It's also good with your Fell Synergy, as you're going to have your pet being passively healed, so you're not going to like have your pet die to this. We're going to grab Life Tap. Life Tap is a decent DPS boost, right? You're always going to be life tapping in a fight. This just reduces GCD on it, which saves you some globals along the line. And then we're going to grab probably Soulstone. You could grab Shadow Flame if you have to put a slow on something. Like this is going to be useful for 5-mans and like trash and stuff like that. It's also like really nice in PvP. If you could grab Hellstone if you want, but I would never. I would just grab a Soulstone, which your Soulstone is now a battle res, so this just increases the health they get when they res. Miners don't really matter. You don't need shards anymore. None of this really matters. You can just grab whatever. So that's talents and glyphs. Again, there's not too much variability in the destruction talents. Next, we're going to talk about the new abilities you get 81, 83, and 85. Fellflame is just like a nice little no CD instant that you can use during movement. This isn't like a rotational ability, but it's just, you know, you didn't really have a spell to use while you're moving before. It's 40-yard range. It increases the duration of your immolate when it hits, and it just does a little bit of damage, so your movement is less punished. 83, you get Dark Intent. This is like focus magic, but with haste. It's going to mess up parsing, and people are going to be bothering you for this a lot, so have fun with that. Gives you and the target 3% haste. Whenever the linked target gets a crit on a hot or a dot, you get 3% and they get 1% stacking of periodic damage and healing. So I think the best target for this is like, if it's a healer, it's the Resto Druid, and if it's a DPS, it's like Priest is the number 1 and Fire Mage is the number 2. Obviously, like an Affliction Warlock would be the number 1 target, but they have it themselves, so they don't need to put it. They don't need to get it from another Warlock. 85, you get Demon Soul. This is like a big 2-minute on-use CD, and it's kind of flavorful. It like has an effect based on what demon you have out. For Destruction, you're going to use this with Imp, so it's just 2-minute CD, and it gives you 30% crit chance on your Destruction spells for 20 seconds. Pretty powerful on-use, which is really nice for us. We have an actual like burst window now. Those are the 3 new abilities you get for leveling. Outside of leveling, you do get a little bit of a reduction on your CD on Soul Shatter, which is nice. It no longer costs a shard either, so you know you can press this more often on trash, which is good. You also have your curse separated from your banes, so Agony and Doom are now banes rather than curses, so you can keep like Curse of Alley up and not lose your DPS curse. You just lose the global. You also get Summon Doomguard as like, it's not like that RP ability where you have 5 people channel and one of them dies, and it's not like, doesn't proc off your Doom killing something anymore. It's just a 10-minute CD that's shared with your Infernal. So you're going to use your Infernal on like AoE and your Doomguard on single target, and this does snapshot your intellect, and I believe your critical strike at the time, so you're going to want to use this when all your procs are up. So yeah, those are the main changes. The only other real big change is shards that I'll talk about a little bit later. Alright, so let's talk about basic rotations. This is recorded on the beta, so I'm only level 80 here. I just character copied from Wrath, but it's basically the same. You don't really get rotational abilities as you level to 85. You just pretty much get that 1 2-minute CD and Fellflame. So your basic rotation is going to be very similar to what was in Wrath. Your priorities are, you know, your Warlock again, so your priorities are keeping your dots up, then just like using your filler, and then your low CD rotation abilities like Conflagrate and Chaos Bolt. The one difference here is that on single target, you are going to be wanting to immolate Corruption and keep your Bane of Doom up. Bane of Doom now ticks every 15 seconds instead of 60 seconds, and when it deals damage, it has a chance to summon like a little imp that will just do a little bit of passive damage, which is nice. So this is like pretty high priority now. It's a strong dot. And then again, as I said before, if there's more than one target, you can only have Doom on one target, and you can only have Havoc on one target. So you're gonna have Doom on one and then Havoc on the other. So again, you keep your dots up, and then once your dots are up, you're gonna Conflagrate on cooldown. You're going to Chaos Bolt on cooldown. The only other thing to keep in mind is that for Destruction, Shadow Flame is an actual like damage buff over just your basic filler, so you're gonna want to be in melee as much as possible. So if you are in melee, you're gonna be Shadow Flaming on CD. But if you're not in melee, you know, you'll just be skipping that. The other thing you want in your rotation is again that Soulfire debuff. So pets are, my pet's kind of bugged out on the beta right now. It won't cast Firebolt, but your pet will be casting Firebolt on the target, and you will be occasionally getting one of those instant Soulfire procs. Just have some way of tracking that. You know, the default in Cataclysm will have a little weak aura that pops up on your screen that will show you when that's up. When that is up, you will be instant Soulfiring, and that will give you this improved Soulfire 20-second buff. After this, you'll be Chaos Bolting on CD. You'll be Shadow Burning in under 20%. And then after all that stuff is on CD, your filler is just Incinerate. So let's go through that quickly again. You're going to dot. You're going to Conflagrate, you're gonna Chaos Bolt, you're gonna Soulfire when you get instants, and then you're going to Incinerate. If you do not get enough instant cast Soulfire procs to keep this up, if this ever does fall off, you will hard cast a Soulfire. So keep that in mind. You're gonna have to track this buff the same way that you used to track, like, Glyph of Life Tap in Wrath of the Lich King. So yeah, that's your basic single target rotation. Against two or two to three targets, like a low target cleave, you're gonna be keeping your dots up, being Immolate and Corruption on every target. You're gonna have Doom on one. You're gonna have Havoc on one, and then I wouldn't put up Agony on the third. It's just not really worth it. And then once you have your dots up on everything and those Banes out, you're just going to do your single target on the highest health one that's going to last the longest. Against like big target cleave, you're going to like probably want to be precasting a Soulfire to get that buff up. And then you're just going to do, if you're in melee, you're going to Shadow Flame. You're probably going to end up Shadow Furying, just, because it's useful to get that stun out on stunnable ads. And then you're going to be doing Rain of Fire. And then you're going to be doing Rain of Fire, which is better than Seed of Corruption. For your cooldowns, the only on-use you really have is Demon Soul. And you're going to be using that with your Imp, which is just 30% crit for 20 seconds. You should basically just use this on CD. Although you can like keep your eye out for, obviously like if there's like a damage amp phase, or if there's ads coming up, or if there's like an intermission phase, you might want to delay it, but usually you're just going to want to get maximum uptime. And of course, using it on pull with Lust. So that's the rotations. Let's talk about openers. So what I would do for your opener is, again, your opener is going to be a lot more simple than the Demonology opener. What you're going to want to be doing is, you're obviously going to be pre-potting. Usually, because of that Soulfire buff, what you would do if you didn't have Soulburn is you would precast a Soulfire because it's like a long cast time and it does a bit of damage and it also gives you the buff right away. But because you have a Soulburn, what you're going to be doing is you're going to Soulburn. You're going to, if it's a fight where Shadow Word matters, or Nether Ward rather, you're gonna pop that before the pull. You're going to precast and Incinerate, and then use your instant Soulfire as the boss is pulled. That way you get the Incinerate and the Soulfire. And once you so you're gonna Soulburn, you're going to Soul Harvest the Shard back, pre-pull, and then you're going to precast, Incinerate, and use your instant Soulfire. And then you're going to put your dots up. You should probably be pressing Demon Soul like in those first couple of globals as well, along with like your on-uses and your racial abilities. But it just depends like how quickly your Shaman puts up Bloodlust, because you're going to want to have all of that Demon Soul inside of Bloodlust. So yeah, again, you're going to Soulburn, you're going to Soul Harvest the Shard back. You're going to, Shadow Ward if it matters. You're going to precast Incinerate, and then Soulfire, and then put your dots up. And Conflagrate, Chaos Bolt, and then into the rotation. So that's your opener. Again, like super simple. Also, if there's no curse user, you have to put Curse Valley up. So I would just do that. You'd be soul burning, you'd be casting your Incinerate, getting your instant Soulfire, and then that's when I would put up your curse. And then of course your Doomguard. You're going to want to pop this Doomguard when you have all of your intellect procs out, and you've used all your on-use, your Blood Fury, your Orc, all that stuff. The only other little min-max thing you can do in the fight is, if you don't get enough imp procs to get uptime on your Soulfire buff, your Soulburn has a 45-second cooldown, and you can use it 3 times in the fight if you do the little pre-pull trick I'm talking about, where you Soul Harvest up to 3 shards. After you Soulburn. So if that buff ever is going to drop, instead of hard casting a Soulfire to get it back up, you can, if this is off CD, Soulburn and instant Soulfire to get it back up. It also is just like a little bit of a DPS buff to just use this if you ever, if you have full uptime and it's like at the end of the fight, you can just Soulburn one out for a little bit of a damage buff. Alright, so let's talk about stats. So, all the specs lose their hit talents, and their the hit debuff on the boss no longer exists. So your hit cap is going to be just natural flat, like that hard cap of 17% for every caster, which is a bit of a bummer, especially like in pre-patch. This is my Wrath gear. You're going to have to probably reforge a decent amount of stats to hit, or regem, although regemming is probably not worth. I would just reforge it. So yeah, you're going to get that 70% hit cap, and then you're going to get haste ratings to your caps. All the dots now benefit from haste in Cataclysm, so you're going to be gemming and gearing towards those soft caps where you get a little bit of an extra tick on your corruption and your immolate. After haste, you get crit, and then after crit, you get mastery. So mastery is like your least valuable stat as destruction. Although like it's kind of nice because haste is like really good for every warlock spec, so you have decent amount of flexibility with your gear in terms of swapping between like affliction, demo, and destruction. Although demo does value mastery pretty highly, so it can be a bit more difficult to swap between those two specs. But if you really enjoy like all the different specs, you can swap Destron fights where like Havoc is good and not have to do too much messing around with your gear. Intellect is obviously like it's spell power now, so all your spell power gems are going to swap over to int, and int is going to be like really, really valuable. Consumables are really, really simple in Cataclysm. There's no like haste pot versus wild magic pot or anything. It's literally just you use your feast. If you don't have a feast, you use int food. You're going to flask it and you're going to pot int. So that's like really simple. Um, for gems, you're going to gem if the socket bonus is 20 int or 30 of a secondary stat. That's just like the general heuristic for like I think almost every spec because main stat is so good. So you're going to gem int, you're going to use your like crit percentage increased effect meta gem, which I think you pretty much use as long as it's in the game. And then you're going to get, int haste in your yellow sockets if you're under the soft cap, otherwise you get int crit. And for your blue sockets, you're going to be grabbing like hit if you're under cap. If you're not under cap, you just get intellect in those. So that's gems again. Gems are super simple. But if you're in doubt, just sim it. For professions, this is going to be a common refrain for like every DPS spec. I'm pretty sure tailoring is just BIS for everyone. It gives like a really high amount of intellect on average over a fight. It procs right at the start when like all your CDs are up and Bloodlust is going. It snapshots into your Doom Guard, all that stuff. So tailoring is just like BIS for pretty much every DPS spec. Everyone's going to have engineering if you're coming from Wrath of the Lich King. Engineering is good. If you don't have an on-use trinket, it's like excellent. If you do have an on-use trinket, it lowers in value significantly, although you do get like your 359 pre-BIS helmet, so you can be tailoring NG at the beginning, get that helm as soon as you replace it. You can drop it for another profession. Blacksmithing, when you get epic gems, is like going to be your BIS second profession if you have an on-use trinket, because it gives you 100 intellect instead of the passive 80 that like every other profession gives you. Jewel crafting is kind of bad because just once epic gems are out, it like gives you a less intellect than the other professions, although it's fine until epic gems come out. Alchemy is just 80 int, enchanting is 80 int, and inscription's 80 int. Pretty much every like main crafting profession is just 80 int, which is great. Like you can go in with any combination of them and do decent. Not super important even max your professions like it is in Wrath. Enchanting tinkers don't take up an enchantment slot, but they also have like a high chance to fail in raid, so you can't rely on your nitros. Although like the nitro failure is just it does a bunch of damage to you, and like if your healers can just heal you, and you can also like Nether Ward and Health Stone, and you're never gonna die from it. You just can't like rely on it to always give you move speed. Herbalism gives you a haste on use, which is like actually, not embarrassing to have. The only profession you really shouldn't have is mining, because it's just stamina. But yeah, pretty much just take whatever you think is like cool or gonna make you gold unless you're really, really min-maxing. Let's talk about races. So I think for Horde, again, I'm just gonna wait until Sims come out because I haven't tested on the beta whether or not like your pet damage buffs your Doom Guard or like anything like that. But I think Orc Control are probably going to be close. Goblin with the passive 1% haste is like going to be decent. And also like the Goblin Racial with Goblin Jump is really nice for movement. And you have your Fell Flame, like your movement isn't as punishing anymore, so that's like a little bit diminished in value. The thing about Orc that's nice is that it lines up 2 minutes with your Demon Soul really well, whereas Berserking is still 3 minutes. For Alliance, just reroll Horde, but if you don't want to reroll Horde, I would go Worgen for the crit. Like, if you're going to PvP, you can go human or whatever, but Worgen is going to actually give you damage bonus. So that's races. Again, like, not huge. More matters for Horde. Other than that, just make sure you have a central weak aura that is going to show you, like, dots and your procs and your big CDs. That's, like, really the most important part. As long as you have something that does that, doesn't really matter what it is. You can use, like, Fogies if you're in doubt. Otherwise, I think Murphin has a good one, and you can even make one yourself in like half an hour and just put your dots on it and put your main CDs, and you'll be just fine. important macros that really aren't. And you just have your pet attack macros and stuff. You should have your imp now gets dispel, so you should have that bound and be using it because it's, just free. It's like off GCD. That's a nice little thing you can do. In terms of survivability in a raid, just be looking for opportunities to use your Nether Ward on prog. You can heal yourself with Death Coil. Just the typical Warlock survivability stuff. You have like a decent amount of just tankiness with your Nether Ward, Nether Protection, and as well as like your Soul Leech is going to heal you for a significant amount, so you're pretty tanky. Last thing I'm going to talk about is just previous gearing tips for Phase 1. You're going to get all your reputations. If you quest, you're going to get them like much more easily. If you dungeon level, you can just go back and do the intro quests, get the tabards. You're going to be doing a lot of heroics. Like if you're pushing really hard, you're going to get most of the reputations to Exalted just doing heroics, so you don't really have to worry about it too much. If you're not pushing hard, what I would prioritize is get the Therazane tabard, get that to Exalted, because that's going to benefit you for the rest of the expansion, so it's time well spent. Then I would prioritize buying your Darkmoon card Volcano, which is just like insanely good trinket. It's pretty much the Darkmoon card greatness of Cataclysm for caster DPS. So those are the two things I'd prioritize. I would not prioritize Tolbrad, that'd be last. It's just not worth it for anyone who's not a tank. Too long and too annoying of a grind. But yeah, you look up the rep vendors and grab the ones that fill the slots in the gear you didn't get from heroics. But again, if you're pushing really hard, you're going to get you're going to be spamming heroics, so you won't have any trouble getting your reps to Exalted. Beyond that, there's like decent BOEs from all the professions, so if you're in pre-patch right now, just spend your time getting gold by whatever means to be able to buy that Darkmoon card and those BOEs. So that's Destruction Warlock. If you want like a more in-depth guide of just like the basic class changes that come to Warlock, you can check out my Demonology guide. I go through like that pretty in-depth, talking about soul shards and just the basic way that the specs change. I might come out with an affliction guide, so keep your eye out for that. Thanks for watching, and good luck on Cata launch for all you people who are going to be questing. I hope that the Vashtir and Hydral bottleneck is not too terrible.